Ready to boost your video creations? Try Maxon Studio. Maxon Studio's got your back with a sleek dashboard that's like your own personal editing playground. We're talking dynamic capsules galore. Our capsules are designed to supercharge your content creation game inside After Effects. So say goodbye to staring at a blank screen wondering where to start. Maxon Studio hooks you up with pre-designed, customizable elements. The collection is always growing, from elegant motion graphics to seamless transitions, animated titles, and amazing effects. The best part is, you don't need to be a design wizard or spend hours tweaking every little detail, because user-friendly controls make it easy to tweak text, colors, and more to match your vibe. So, what are you waiting for? Start creating breathtaking videos today with Maxon Studio. Take it for a spin with our free 14-day trial. Level up your content now.
What's up, everyone? Good morning or good afternoon or good evening, depending where you're from. For me, it's the afternoon. It's 4 o'clock here in England. Good to see you all. It's been a while since I've done a stream. It's been about a month. Yeah, so it's good to be back. Nice to see you all. Hey to Ruben in the chat. If this is your first time joining one of not only my streams, but the Maxon streams, then hi. My name's Elly. I am a trainer at Maxon, and thank you for taking part in our live stream. So we're streaming on the Maxon channel and the Maxon Training Team YouTube channel. So for anyone who would like to know, yes, this is recorded, don't worry, and it will get uploaded onto the Maxon Training Team YouTube channel, and it gets timestamped thanks to the amazing Dr. Sassy. So first of all, shout out Dr. Sassy. Thank you so much for doing that. He does that for the whole team, for all the streams. So yeah, amazing that he does that for us. Happy New Year, everyone. I know that seems a little bit strange because it's now the 30th of January, but this is my first time live streaming this year. So happy New Year to everyone. Belated. Cool. So the plan for today is we're going to be diving into some stuff that you can see on screen already. And in particular, we're looking at vertex maps, but we're going to dive into a few different ways that we can create vertex maps, and in particular, creating growths. And so I put together this animation. I've been playing around with this a fair bit using Patrick 4D's assets that were made in the asset browser, or made for the asset browser. So yeah, he put together some very cool things that are also textured and textured in Redshift. So I'm going to show you where we can find those, how we can use them, how we can play around with them as well with vertex maps. So, you know, we don't just kind of use it inside of Cinema 4D, we can use it in Redshift as well. So yeah, let me just play this for you just so you can see how this looks. So we have this kind of moldy growth going along the surface of this sort of biscuit or cookie, whatever you want to call it. And this kind of effect it looks so good, but it's so easy. So throughout the next, I don't know, maybe 40 minutes, we're going to dive into a few different ways that we can create these growths, because some might be helpful for different projects. So there are many different ways we can create a growth. So yeah, hopefully one of them will be suitable for you. And then of course, we'll dive into Redshift as well. And as always, there is a question area, so feel free to ask me any questions. I'll do my best to answer them. If I can't, I'll definitely get back to you. So also, hey to everyone in the chat. So I already said hey to Ruben, hey to Chandu, Switch Media Tube, hey Sharon, and Nikki Taru. Yeah, so let me know any questions in there. I will do my best to keep an eye on them while we are live streaming. All right, cool. So we're also going to dive into this setup as well, which is a Mograph setup. So we're going to take a look at exactly how to create a vertex map on like a single object, and then how we can do it on multiple objects, and then how we can do it on a Mograph setup, because each of them require a slightly different setup. So we'll start off just by diving straight into Cinema 4D. And a few things that I like to do when I start is I switch off my work plane. This is purely for the sake of a live stream. And I set my icons to large, just so you guys can see those a little bit easier. And I have my cursor being highlighted. This allows me to just zoom in a little bit with a special shortcut. So that's why that is got a bit of a green ring to it. So what I'm going to do, first of all, I want to show you where you can find these assets, because they are truly incredible. I've been playing around with them loads, and it just makes this setup so easy because I don't have to model, which, if you know me, I'm not the best at modeling. And we have some pre-made textures that are incredible. And as I said, Pat, amazing artist, amazing ZBrush guy. And yeah, he created some of these assets. So if I just search, you know what, we can actually just go into my asset browser and let's go to models, and let's just pull this out and let's go to food. So all of these cookie assets he created. So again, you know, these are slightly more relevant to Christmas, but I think what I love about this one here is it's not kind of Christmas related. Nothing against Christmas, but yeah, I thought I would take this asset, and anything with this little Redshift icon, this little icon here is the Redshift icon. It means it's textured for Redshift. So it's like good to go, basically. So if I just double click, it creates the asset in my viewport. And if I just press S, it's going to basically select and highlight that object here. So we can see we have this in here. It is already textured for us. It's got our RS object tag, and it's basically good to go. And so what I'm going to do is, for the sakes of this, I'm just going to switch off and remove those two tags. So the material and the Redshift object tag. That's not a problem because in here, it's still there. We still have our material, don't worry. And so I'm going to show you how we can play around and create vertex maps, in particular a vertex map growth. But the purpose of this is vertex maps are unbelievably powerful inside of Cinema 4D. And as soon as you then understand how they work and how you can make them, it will open up a whole range of possibilities for, you know, animation, for texturing, animated textures, which we'll look at today, and just loads of other things. We can use it in simulation. We can use it in like displacement, loads of places. We can emit particles from areas of, you know, an object using vertex map data. So a couple of different ways to create a vertex map. And the important thing to kind of bear in mind is the topology, which are the segments or the subdivisions that make up your geometry, is going to be quite key here, because think of it as the resolution of your texture map will be based on the resolution of your object. So if your object is very low resolution, we won't have a very nice growth. So this is okay. I'll show you how we can up-res it if we need to later. But for now, I'm going to leave this as it is. So we have our cookie. And the first way that we can create a vertex map is purely by right-clicking on the cookie. And then we can just search vertex. And under the other tags, we have a vertex map. And if I just select that, you'll notice that everything has just gone red on here. So we have our vertex map tag, which is what this little tag is. It's kind of like 5-sided dice here. This is a vertex map tag. And everything's gone red. When we talk about vertex maps, so I've just got my brush tool here selected. It selects it by default when I add a vertex map. And if I just click and hover over and, you know, scrub some stuff here, it's then going yellow. And this is vertex weight. So I'm painting the vertex weight effectively. And where this is interesting, or what this basically means, is we can then take this data and we can use it inside of Cinema 4D. And so what this means, everywhere that is red has a vertex weight of 0. So it equals 0, a numerical value of 0, 0% of something, displacement, for example. Everywhere that is then this yellow, we then have a value of 1, a 100% vertex weight, and therefore we could then use that and have, let's say, 100% displacement. So all we did there was, you know, right click on the vertex map and we just kind of painted some weight on there. But if I just come out of here, and just re-add that tag on there. If I click the tag, we have a couple of settings inside of here. And the important one that we want is this use transfer. So I'm going to select that. Some of you, if you're on an older version of Cinema 4D, it will be use fields. And now what we have, those of you who are avid Cinema 4D users, will recognize this as our fields menu. And so now what we have is the ability to use fields to control our vertex map and our change in weight. So we have this freeze layer by default, which will be important later. But for now, I'm actually just going to delete it. So I selected it, deleted it, and it's now gone. So just like your normal fields menu, we have our fields, we have our different filter layers, and then we also have our modifier layers. So let me just take a linear field. Here we go. Eyes weren't working then. And this cookie is really, really small. So I'm going to need to reduce the length of my field here. And so now what we can see is we can now see the field is now controlling that weight value. Everywhere to the left of my screen is red. Everywhere to the right is yellow. Everywhere in the middle is then orange. And then what we could do, we could actually move, if I move my linear field, we can then change that weight. Cool, so if I can make that a little bit bigger, we can see in the middle, we now have that orange gradient. So this would now be a percentage of weight value. So that is another way of doing it, using fields and things like that. So a final way, what we can do is, let me just delete this tag again, just because I want to show you everything from scratch, is we can actually select points or polygons on our objects if they are polygonal, that is. So it has to be a polygonal object in this instance in order to select a point. And then we can create a vertex map weight based on that selection. So if I just come in and click the cookie and, I don't know, just for the sake of it, I'm just going to grab a load of points just to show you this. And then we can go to select, and down at the very bottom, we have a set vertex weight. And now we can see it's asking for a value. So what value do you want to set the points that you've selected? What weight value? So remember, red is 0, yellow is 100%. So if we say, okay, set these to 100%, please. What we now have is all the areas that we selected, all those points, all those polygons, we now have a value of 100%, and everything else is now set to a value of 0, and that is red. So the colors are just representing that physical weight value for us, or that change in weight value. So with that information, with that knowledge, we can then look at how we could create a vertex map growth. And what this allows me to do, it allows me to animate the change in weight value. And all of this information is going to be really important when we then look at what we can do with that vertex map. So at the moment, we're just looking at the way that we can create the vertex map and the way that we can change and create those values. And then the second half of this is going to be, okay, now we have that information and that data, how can we now use it to do different things? So what we'll do is we're going to look at a way of creating a growth. And so the concepts that we just looked at all still apply. But now what we're going to do is we're going to look at creating an interesting growth. And so what we'll do is we'll just, again, remake that vertex map from scratch. So everything we're going to do today is going to be from scratch, so you can definitely follow along. Use transfer. And now we have this freeze option. This is one of our modifier layers that you can find inside of here. And I'm going to leave this as it is because this is a really great tool of creating a growth. Let's just create some more frames here in my timeline. We'll set 300. And then what we're going to do, I'm going to define an area where my growth is going to begin from. So I could have done this by taking a point choosing a point and then adding my vertex map, or we can do it this way and we can do it with a field. So at the start of my timeline, let's just grab a spherical field, nice and simple. Let's make it small because again, the cookie is really small. So I need to make sure everything I now do is a smaller value. And let's just sort of move this to the edge. So we can see as I kind of move this spherical field in, we are able to see that change. So let's just leave it like this for now. And then let's take a look inside of here. So the reason I've left my freeze in is because if I select my freeze, down the very bottom, you'll notice there's a couple of different modes. So down here, we have a few different modes. And the very bottom one, you can probably guess what it's going to do, is going to grow our selection. So if I go to grow, what we can do is we can press play and everything is happening way too quickly. And so the trouble is my growth is looking at the radius and the effect strength. The radius is it's looking at every point. So from my selection, so my current selection is this yellow area. From here, it's doing a 10 centimeter radius, and every point or polygon within that 10 centimeter radius is then going to be then added to that selection. So that's why that yellow area is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. The trouble is that radius is way too big for the object that we're using. And the reverse is also applicable here. So if you're working with very large models, then make sure you then go up with that radius. But for me, because I'm working with this really teeny tiny cookie, I need to just reduce this right down. Then my effect strength is then how quickly this growth is then happening. So they work hand in hand, but now what I can do, if I press play, we can see, okay, maybe 0.1, maybe we go 0.2. So now we're going from this starting sort of selection or area that has that yellow, that 100% weight value, and it's now growing within that 0.2 radius. But the trouble is, if that growth is now too fast, I can come into my effect strength and I can set that to a lower percentage. Again, we can do the reverse. We can increase these numbers and we can make everything faster if we want to. And now we can play it. And we can now see we get a much smoother animation. Cool. Right, so what else could we do? Well, I'm not going to physically do it because it can affect our performance a little bit, but we could actually animate our spherical field on. So a lot of people will say, okay, what if we don't want, to have any change in weight at the beginning? What if I want to have everything red and then it becomes yellow? Well, we could animate this spherical field onto my object. Or I could even, if I'm being really lazy, I could animate the size. So I could animate that from 0 to 1. And then once that happens, so I could keyframe these things, once that happens, the growth will then occur. Okay. So we've taken a look at how we can actually create this growth. And again, I'm going to show you a couple of different ways that we can do this using a few different methods. So this is the first one. And a lot of the time when we look at vertex maps, the growth isn't as interesting as perhaps we would want it to be, because it's starting from a point and then from a particular radius, it's going to grow and grow and grow. But what if we wanted to add some slight variation to our growth, which again is going to, when we then do that growing mold, it's going to create that slightly more random growth effect. Well, the way that we can do that is by taking two different things. We could take a random field or we could take a shader field, because both of them apply a noise over the top of this. I'm going to personally use a shader field because you have more control. There is more control of the noises within the shader field than there is of the random field. So if I take a shader field, and just like we normally do, we have to apply a noise shader to it. And one that I've been playing with, that I'm really into at the moment, is this electric. So maybe, let's make it a little bit smaller. So we now have this sort of effect happening over the top. But the next thing we need to do is back in my field here, we actually want this to control the freeze radius. So we get that really interesting randomness. So here, it's a little drop down menu, click that, and you can see we have a radius folder. And just like in Cinema 4D, when we make things children of things, we can do the effect here. So I can make the shader field a child of my radius just by dragging and dropping. And then we can press play. It's not really doing what we kind of hoped it would. And this is fine. All we need to do now is we need to tweak a few settings. So now, because this is controlling the noise or randomness of my radius, I might actually just need to up this radius a little bit so it doesn't prevent me from seeing and, growing onto those next points or polygons. So now we have something a bit like this. For the sake of this, I'm just going to speed up the effect strength just so we don't have to keep waiting for it every time. So now we have a slightly more interesting growth, far more interesting than it was before, because it's looking at that shader field, which is that electric noise algorithm or pattern, and that's on our radius. And so we just up that radius to ensure this happened. But you might like the fact that it leaves some of these red areas. So remember, these are the areas that have a 0% value. But what if we don't want to leave these? This is where it comes down to going back into your shader field. Then there's an option called remapping. It allows us to remap the minimum and maximum values of our shader. And if I just come into my minimum here, and if I just pull that up, you'll see how this changes already. Like, it kind of gives me a bit of a preview. So if I just put that on something like 30%, we can now see we're still getting, maybe that's now a little bit too fast. Let's go 24. And so now we can see we're still getting that random growth, but we're now going from 100% red, value of 0, and fully yellow, value of 100%. And so this is a really interesting way of creating a animated growth. And so we can look at all the other things that we just did. So we could do it from a point and create our vertex map and then create our freeze and our noise. Or we could take a spherical field, animate it on. We could take a linear field, or we can do loads of different things. And another thing that we can do, and this is something that I actually did in this particular scene here, is we can kind of fake a growth as well. So if we don't want to, go with this particular method, if I just want to remove those and then clear all of this. So we're now back to kind of square one. We have our effectively empty vertex map here. Then we can just throw in a shader field. So just similar to what we just did, we've got ourselves a shader field here. And then under here, let's just grab ourselves a noise again. And again, I'm playing around a lot with this electric one. And if we just sort of shrink this down, and maybe we can tweak some of these. So we have low clip, high clip, brightness, contrast. Those of you that use noises or don't use noises, I would seriously recommend them. Not only are they very powerful on their own, you have loads of different options inside of here, but you then have all of these settings that you can tweak as well to really perfect and create something that is more interesting. So we can sort of like tweak this a little bit more and, kind of play around with our scale, with our octaves. And sometimes this can change it, sometimes it doesn't, depending on the, the noise you're creating. So here we go. So cycles often create some like interesting style effects. So yeah, lots of different options inside of here. And where this then becomes quite cool is by just purely playing around with this brightness slider, we can create a growth this way. And so this is actually what I did on this shot. Hang on, let me find, yeah, this one here. This one here and this animation, I didn't even use a vertex map growth. Well, I used a vertex map growth, but I didn't use a freeze growth. I just basically animated the shader, and it just creates a really cool effect as well. So we could find like a starting point on frame 0 for our brightness. And this is the only thing with a keyframe. Keyframe your brightness, and then let's say where you want the end of your animation to be. Frame 270. We can just pull this up and find a point when you're then happy. So maybe something like this. We can set that. And now, as this plays through, we can see we have a kind of fake growth that purely is just looking at the shader. So yeah, a couple of different ways to do that. Right, so now with that information, I'm going to show you how we can then do it on multiple objects, and then how we can do it on Mograph. And then I'm going to show you how we can take this information, this data, and we can use it in texturing. And if we have some time, I might show you some other ways that we can use it as well. But basically, they're very, very powerful, especially for animation. Cool, right, so just for the sakes of this, let's just delete all of that. And then let's just add a few more of these. So let me just Command, click and drag. So we kind of want to grab a few more of these. So I'm just going to move them a little bit like that. So we now have our 3 little cookies. And so what if you have multiple objects in your scene, all separate objects like they are now, and you want to control them via a single texture map, vertex map? So obviously, if you want to control them with separate vertex maps, absolutely fine. Just do exactly what we just did in the last 15 minutes. Add a vertex map to each of them, create your growth in the exact same way that we just did then, which is actually what I did in the hero image of this thumbnail, the YouTube video. Yeah, I created like 8 or 9 different vertex map growths because I just wanted to see what it looked like. But then this way, if we want to control it with one vertex map, what we have to do is the magic of the connect generator. So we can take the connect. We're going to highlight all of the objects that I then want to be defined by a single vertex map. I'm going to drag and drop them into my connect, and we can just switch off weld, just so we don't get that kind of like crazy breaking going on. So we're not welding them together. We're just now able to put a vertex map on the connect. So this is something that came, I don't know, maybe a year ago in a release, the ability to add vertex maps to generators and parametric objects. So very powerful. No longer has to be a polygonal object for a vertex map. So then what I can do, I can right click my connect, and just like we did before, we can go to vertex map. And what you'll notice is it applied that map to all of those objects. And then from here, we can do all the stuff that we just did. We can create a shader field and animate it that way, or we can do a growth. And I want to show you a growth because I want to show you a trick that you need to bear in mind when you're doing this. So we have this going on, and we then need our freeze layer. And we want it to grow. So let's reduce that down. So let me just clear that. So sometimes it can happen. So I need to make sure it's in the correct order. There we go. Right. So I had to make sure that my freeze was below and my spherical field is set to max. Sometimes what can happen is if you add the freeze layer, sometimes it can freeze the entire vertex map weight as it is. If it does, and you find that things aren't working, just clear. Just hit that clear button. Once probably, but you know me, I'll have to just tap that about 3 times. So now we have that growth. So let me just increase that a little bit. So we have that growth. Okay, cool. This is exactly what I wanted to happen. So the growth has now happened. Set it up in the exact same way we just set up that first one. Freeze, growing, radius, reduced, spherical field, controlling where it's starting. But now what you'll see is, because it's then not able to effectively see that next object. And what's actually happening here, for anyone who isn't quite sure, is the radius is looking for a point or a polygon to continue that growth. But the trouble is that next cookie is further than 0.4 centimeters away, so it's not able to jump to the next object. So what I can do, this is a little bit of a guessing game. If you want to get a cube out and measure the distance, by all means you can. But let's just sort of do a bit of a guessing game here. Maybe we can make it a little bit bigger. Okay, perfect. Cool. So now what we have is, because it can then see that next object, because we have that radius now set to 3, it's able to jump and connect to the next object, and then do the next object, the next object. So this is the way, if you've got multiple objects in your scene, this is how you would set that up. And the final one is how we would then do it with the Mograph setup, which is this one here. And so let's just remake that setup. Let's just remake it just for fun. So we have the cookie here, and let's just set up a very, very simple Mograph setup. So I'm going to take a cloner. I'm going to drop my cookie in the cloner, and let's set that to, I can't remember what values I had in these, but let's just do something like this. Maybe we can reduce that down. Let's do 2 by 3 by 2. Okay, cool. So we've got our little cookies going on here. Then what we can do, we can make it, far more interesting, like we like to do with Mograph. And the easiest way to do this is with my cloner selected, we can come in and we can do a random effector. So random effector is going to allow me to randomly distribute the position, rotation, and scale of my different clones up to the values that I put inside of here. So we could do some rotation inside of here, and then we could do some scaling if you want them slightly different sizings. And then what we can do is, you'll find sometimes with the random effector, you can't really prevent those intersections. I mean, we can come in and we can adjust the seed value if we want to, and try and find a good match. Or we can just double up on some effectors and create the push apart effector. Reduce that back down. So something like 4 centimeters. Again, remember, this is all based on the scene scale and sizing. So because my cookies are very small, I'm having to reduce my default values to very small settings. And so the radius doesn't need to be 100 centimeters because it's going to throw them apart by 100 centimeters. They just need to be a smaller distance. So I set it to 4. And now we have that little, basically identical to that setup that we created before. So we have our Mograph set up. For the sakes of this, let's just throw ourselves a camera, and then let's find a little angle here. Maybe we can kind of come in and have a little look on this one here. And as always, we can, continue to come in and we can sort of play around with that seed value to find something that probably looks a little bit more interesting. So maybe something a bit like that is probably a bit more interesting. There we go. Let's go with something like this. So yeah, all we've done is really quickly create a nicer looking Mograph setup using that cookie, the cloner, the random, which is randomly, distributing on position, scale, and rotation. And then that push apart is just ensuring we don't have any intersections. And the purpose of this is to show you now how we can then create that vertex map setup and things on the cloner. And so very similar to that connect, what we can do now is we can right click on our cloner and we can just add a vertex map. And just like the previous setups, we then have that weight value applied over the surface of our objects. And so for this one, instead of doing a freeze growth, I'm going to match what I did in this project file here. So this one here, I'm just going to match that, which was exactly like I showed you before, just animating the brightness of a shader field. So this is, again, you know, a really, really simple, easy trick to create some varying weight values. So we'll come in, we'll grab ourselves a noise, and then what we can do is we can just reduce this down. So again, I'm going to stick with electric because I like it. Let's reduce that global scale. And then maybe we could increase that high clip and, you know, maybe play with that contrast a little bit if we want to. And then again, just like before, we can just animate that brightness. And so I want everything to go from red to yellow. So I want to make sure everything is red. So I can set a keyframe on my brightness. And then at maybe 270 or apparently 271, let's go 270. We can then pull that up until I have a pattern or a design that I then like the look of. So something perhaps a bit like that. And we can set that keyframe. Did I not set a keyframe? Are we doing that? Are we doing what I want you to do? There we go. Okay, cool. Right, and press play. And then what we can see is we can see this begin to grow and begin to get this change in weight value. Okay. One thing I do want to talk about really quickly, and this was something I discovered whilst kind of playing around, getting ready for the stream. By default, when you do this setup, the shader field becomes just on the same line as everything else in our objects manager, which in some cases could be fine. But in some cases, if we then want to move our clones, for example, if I move my cloner, you'll notice that random noise is actually, well, it looks like it's moving, but really what's happening is the noise is static and the clones and the objects are moving through it. So what you need to be careful of is this. And a lovely little trick to fix it is you just make the shader field child of the cookie. It's really, I love it when there's like a simple answer to a problem. And so, yeah, I messaged Jonas and was like, Jonas, how do I fix this? And he was like, make it a child. I was like, that's the answer. So now, when I move this around, it sticks. Perfect. Okay, cool. Right. So we've taken a look at vertex maps and we've taken a look at how to create these different animations. And so again, you can take this information that we've just gone through and you can now adapt it to your own objects, to your own scenes, create your own growths using random, using different noises, using different kind of patterns or keyframing your fields. And then you can take that and then you can use it for loads of different things inside of Cinema 4D. So I'm going to show you how you can use it in texturing, but you can use it in so many different things. So very, very powerful. So cool. We have this kind of growth effect going on, right? So let's just set up a little bit for Redshift. I'm just going to change my format to 50 to like 1 by 1. This is the only reason I do this is it's so I can show you the viewport and I can show you that on there. My render view as well. Right, cool. Let's go with that. And let's go a little bit closer. It looks a bit cool. So Dean's actually had a really good question. And it's about making the noise. So let me just pop this up on screen. So don't forget, if you have any questions for me, then let me know. So yeah, Dean was wondering, wouldn't setting the noise mode to object instead of world also keep the noise from floating when the cookies move? So normally, yes, when it comes to texturing, this is the case, but for some reason, and this is where it works on the stream and then proves me wrong, but if you like pull this out, so again, moving it through, we can see it's moving, right? What Dean's talking about is if I now switch this off, if we come into our noise and in the space, we set it to like world or object. So at the moment it's set to texture. So we set it to object. still moves. Set it to world. It still moves. I know. I was unsure as to why this happened too. If anybody knows, I would love to know. Because yeah, normally in the texturing, you can set the Maxon noises to object or world space, and they therefore don't move. Unfortunately, Dean, as I found out the hard way, none of the options work. The only one that works is unfortunately making it a child. But yeah, if anyone knows why, please let me know, because it was frustrating to come across. All right, cool. So let's get into a little bit of texturing. What I might do actually, I might do it on this scene because I've got my lighting set up already. So yes, let me get rid of that. So I've got the same thing though, just to kind of show you, I have this growth happening, very, very similar to what we just looked through, but now we've got our little lighting going on in here. So cool, let's go on to here and let's take that cookie material. So this is the original material, this one here. So this is the one that Patrick 4D created. And let's just throw that on my cloner. So we have this very nice looking shot. What I might do, let me switch off my depth of field. Switch off depth of field. Let's switch off. No, let's leave that on. All right, cool. So this is the material. Look how wonderfully simple this is. So we have our normal standard material node here. We have some color mixing going on. So really we have this color node and this color node. So we have this kind of like brownish and this light beige, and they're getting mixed based on the curvature node. So the curvature node, what we can do is we can grab the convex and the concave values on an object, and then we can use them to mix and combine materials. This is then controlling the subsurface color. So this is where the magic is of a lot of his work, I think, is food stuff requires a lot of subsurface, or at least an element of subsurface. So that actually we can see we don't have any base color. We're only controlling subsurface. Then we have a Maxon noise controlling the surface detail. So if I just solo these, you can see them. And then we have a Maxon noise controlling the displacement. And this is what we have going on. Right. So now what we can do is, what if we wanted to create a mold? So very much like the animation that we looked at the beginning, or any change in texture. And we wanted to take the vertex map growth to control that change in texturing. So we want to animate that texturing now. So the way that we can do that is we can use our vertex map data and the vertex map information. So I'll show you a few different ways that we can do that first, just by creating a brand new material. And let me just switch that off. Okay, so standard material here, nothing fancy going on. The way that we can use that vertex map data, we just grab a vertex attribute node. And inside of here, it asks for an attribute. And this is based on the name of your vertex map. And so a small tip for you, if you're going to be using multiple vertex maps in your scene, definitely rename them. Definitely rename them. So you don't have, everything titled vertex map, which could then have an issue with this as well. If every vertex map was called vertex map, it won't know which one is which. So yeah, name them, definitely comes in handy. And then you can drag and drop your vertex map into that attribute. And then now what we can do, if we solo the vertex attribute, what it's done is, if I just got to pull this over, you can see it's translating that vertex weight into grayscale values. And then once we have grayscale values, which can translate to numerical values inside of Redshift, we can then use that to control different things. So the simplest thing that we can do is we could connect this to the base color. And so now we can see, if I come back on my timeline, we have everything that is red is now black. And as it grows and 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 grows, we can then see it's then changing to white. And the areas in between those mid-levels or mid-weight values are then grayscale. So this is how this is working. And then what we can do is we can come in and we can go, all right, well, what if we want to recolor this now? What if we want to have different colors? So we could come in and we could define some different colors. So now, very similar as before, as it starts, they're going to be this kind of like yellowy orange. And as it grows and grows and grows, it will introduce more of that secondary color. And so this is just looking at a color at the moment. We're only controlling color. But what if we wanted to do something a little bit more interesting? Well, then we could blend between different things, or we can use this as a mask. So that would be very similar to the color options. So we could come in and we can take a color layer. And just for the sakes of this, I'm just going to define some very, obviously different colors. And so we have a color layer now with the first color being red and the second color being blue. And then what we can do, because this is grayscale, so very similar to like a mask in Photoshop, we can use this as the mask. And so now we're masking between these two base colors of my object. And again, don't forget, it's going to take that growth and that animation that you've just set up. So we can create that in here. So loads of different things that we can do with this vertex attribute. We could use it to control the metalness. So if I plug that into my metalness, now we can see the areas that are black versus the areas that are white. And so remember, these values translate to 0 to 1. So 0, so that red area is going to be a value of 0 inside of our textures. Value of 1 is going to be 100% value. So 0 to 1 metalness. But if we then look at back in this option, how we can then blend between different materials is when it starts to become really interesting and we can create this kind of mold growth. So really quickly, because we have about kind of 10, 12 minutes to go. I've also seen that Colin's saying my camera's frozen. If it has, that's not ideal. Is it frozen for everyone else? Because if it's frozen on something embarrassing as well, that's going to be really awful. So yeah, please let me know if my camera has frozen and I can just pull it down. No one needs to see me kind of frozen while they're trying to learn Cinema 4D. All right, cool. So I'm going to show you how I then created this mold, because it is so easy in comparison to other types of texturing inside of Redshift. Okay, so everyone's saying it's frozen, but not awkwardly. Thank you, Anna. But I will, for the sakes of this, let me pull my camera down. Not embarrassing. It definitely is embarrassing when it freezes. Right, let's just do screen. Here we go. Oh, I came back. Oh, never mind. Right, I'll come back. I'll come back later. But for now, just in case it happens again, I'll pull it down. My poor Wi-Fi is just trying its hardest. Cool. Well, I'll leave it off for now. Maybe I'll come back at the end and have a little chat with my face on. But for now, it's all good. Thank you for letting me know, Colin. You're actually a hero, because that would have been very embarrassing for a long time. All right, cool. So back into the texturing. We're going to look at how we can then go between this cookie style material. So let's just throw that back on here. To then a mold style material. So what we can do, so this is our cookie or our biscuit, whatever you want to call it, depending on where you are in the world. So let's just highlight all of this, pull it a little bit up out of the way, And something I've got really into is if you right click, you can group in a scaffold and then you can title that scaffold. So we can call that like cookie. And then I can just hover the whole thing, and Control C and Control V will allow me to sort of copy it all. And so let's paste it. And so I can just click the header and now just move this whole thing. And what we're going to do here is we're going to call this our mold texture. This is going to be our moldy texture, and this is going to be our cookie texture. And the moldy texture is just going to be based off of this same style design. So if, like me, you love to be lazy and save some time, then this is a cool little workflow for you. So let me throw that in here. And cool. So if we look at our mold, so this is now connected. So we can now see everything that we change. And let's just find some kind of, some moldy colors. So what we're thinking, sort of maybe like a greeny style color. And then so let's go maybe a little bit lighter. And then let's just copy this. And then let's just paste this in here. And so I'm kind of just doing this off the top of my head. But let's see, let's maybe make it lighter. Maybe a bit more blue. So feel free to look at reference images for this. I'm kind of, am I allowed to say I'm winging it? I'm definitely winging it. So something a little bit like this. So we have this kind of slightly moldy growth going on. And so at the moment, we're only looking at the color. We haven't changed anything else yet. What we can do, so let's leave this like this for now. And then what we want to do is we might want to come in and actually play around with our noises a little bit. And so again, because it looks great already, we could just come in and we can tweak that seed value so we know it's different to that cookie material. So this is where Maxon noises are so unbelievably powerful. So we can come in and we can tweak the seed value. We might even want to increase that bump detail for the mold. And then what we can do, so I'm content with how this is looking. Let's leave that as it is. And then what I need to do is I need to then make sure I add some second displacement as well. Because we want to blend between our displacement, because that's what's going to really help sell it, So let's go and change this to the mold one. And then all I'm going to do is, again, let's just play around with that seed value. And I'm going to increase the displacement size. And so what this is going to do is when I then blend between my displacements, which I'll show you how to do in a minute, the first displacement, so the cookie displacement, is going to be smaller, and then the mold displacement is going to look bigger. So we're going to see it growing even more over the surface. That's the impression that we're going to get. So this is the setup we have at the moment. We have our cookie material that was already pre-made by Pat. And then we've just copied it and changed the colors, changed some of the settings to make our mold. And then we've just created a secondary noise. And now the trick is, how can we use our vertex map to animate between them? Well, there are two nodes that you might need. So we have Material Blender and Material Layer. Material Blender, I'll pull them both in just so we can see them. Material Blender allows me to blend and combine up to 7 different materials. And I don't mean color, I mean actual physical materials. So we can have a metal material, a plastic material, a cookie, a mold material, and we can blend between them all. If you want to blend between colors, you can do it. Just use the color layer node, but that, remember, is just color. So material layer, all this is, you can blend between 2 materials, but it is more optimized. It's a slightly newer node. And so because I'm only blending between 2, cookie and mold, I can use the material layer. I can define my base color, which is going to, or my base material, sorry, which is going to be my cookie. Plug that into the surface. Hopefully everyone can see this. Let me just make this a little bit bigger so we can all see this a bit clearer. So we have our base color, that's our cookie. Our secondary color, material, I need to stop saying color, material is going to be the mold. And then we need to grab that same vertex attribute node, make sure we then drag and drop that in. And then this, it controls the mask. So very similar, you know, that we just looked at with color layering, masking in Photoshop. This is how this works. So we go and we hover over the mask. And then we're going to then go from the start of my timeline. And as we progress through my timeline and my vertex map grows, as does the mold. So you won't see it in my render view necessarily, unless you have a very powerful GPU. And if you do, I am so envious of you. But yeah, we can see how this is working. But we haven't done something. So what we haven't done is we haven't blended between our displacement. And this is where things become so cool and so powerful. So what we can do is we have a very handy node called the displacement blender. And it's going to do exactly what we want it to do. It's going to blend between displacement. Also, in case you would like to know, we also have a bump blender. Works in the same way. So we can connect our two sets of displacement, make sure we get them in the right areas. So, you know, cookie is the first one, mold is the second one. Connect that to my displacement. And then now, instead of having a mask, we have a blend weight value. And so basically it's the same kind of thing. All we're doing is now we're controlling the difference in weight for our different displacements. But it works very similar to a mask. And then we can now see we have that different blending values here. And if I went up on my displacement, so if I can do perhaps additive mode, and it's going to add these two together, as we kind of increase, if we want to, we can increase this one to a lot bigger. And so now what we can see is as it grows over the top, obviously this is far too intense, but for the purposes of the live stream, we could increase this displacement scale. And as it grows over the top, we'll see the growth growing over the top of our geometry. And so this is how we can take our vertex map data and we can create really, really fun and interesting animated texturing. And so the main kind of, if you want to kind of like do a slight little recap for everyone, the main kind of takeaway from this is, first of all, how to create vertex maps. We took a look at the very beginning, how we can create those, the different ways that we can create them. But the purposes of that is it's not understanding really how to make them. It's the fact that once we then have them, we can use them in so many different things inside of Cinema 4D. For example, if I don't know, just for the sake of this, quickly show you, I'm not going to actually show you it, but like if we use like cloth simulation, for example, everywhere that has this map option, you can put in your vertex maps. And what it can do is you can then blend and mix and animate between the different weight values to control where does and doesn't have a simulated effect. Or we can do it on displacement, for example. We can throw it in the fields. We can drop a vertex map into our field menu. We can use it in a cloner to control where clones and particles can be. And just like we've seen here, we can use it in texturing to then control masking and animated textures. And so they are very, very, very powerful. And as we kind of saw at the beginning, relatively simple to set up, and they just create a very interesting look. So one final thing that I want to talk about before we sort of wrap up, and that is, if I just come into here, not this one, this one. Cool, right, so really quickly, a node that I haven't talked about yet, and one that is, again, unbelievably powerful, is something called the Jitter node. So when we're using a cloner setup and we're using noises, you know what, I'm going to do this on a separate scene just for ease purposes so you can see this far clearer. than me just showing it on that previous scene. So here we go. We have 3 cubes in a cloner. Not very interesting, but the outcome of this, I promise, is something that you will find very, very cool and very interesting. From material on your cloner, and now we can see we have that on here. So when working with noises, Maxon noises, if we solo this, and let's just make this bigger and set my contrast to 1. Right. You'll notice when you then use Maxon noises on clones, you get the exact same pattern on all of the clones. And this has been an issue that I've sort of spoken about before. I've had asked by studios and artists and designers, Elly, I've got, I'm cloning objects, but I don't want to have the exact same pattern or texture because it's more of a giveaway to the fact it's 3D, right? We want to have randomness and we want to have variation. So there used to be a clever little trick that we could do to fix that. But now the clever little trick is a single node, and that's called the Jitter node. And Jitter node is very powerful for different things. So we can use it to define and vary color. So if I set this to a red color and I change my hue and my saturation, you can see that we're creating random color distribution on my clones. But where it is perhaps slightly more interesting is the fact that we can output differing float value data. And that is what the offset is a float value. And so if I just add that input, so command or control this little dot here, it adds the input for offset. And then what we can do is we can take the float value into our offset, and then we can just add some values, just change like the max value. Again, change the max value based on the number of clones that you have. If you have 9 clones, you can set it to 9, or in this case, set it to 100, then you're not worried. And now what we have is we have completely different looking Maxon noises on top of our mesh or our geometry. So a very, very handy node to use. All right, cool. I'm going to try and come back and hope that my camera is still not frozen or still frozen. Hopefully not. If it is, then hey, we can all laugh about it together. So that kind of wraps up what I wanted to cover today. So if anyone has kind of joined later on, basically we covered how to create this style effect. So I've looked at creating vertex maps, how we can do them, different ways that we can do them, and in particular, creating interesting looking growths. And then we looked at how we can do it on a single object, on multiple objects with a connect, and also on a Mograph setup, because it's slightly different each time. And then we looked at taking that inside of Redshift texturing and how we could recolor those, how we could use it as a layer mask, and how we could use it to blend between different materials, including blending between our displacement as well. So a lot of information, but I hope you all enjoyed it. And I will actually produce a project file for this. But as you've just seen in this live stream, it is very simple to do. It's just using the assets from the asset library. So, if you joined a little bit later on, then we dove into Patrick 4D's assets that he has made and also textured in Redshift. So you can take those, and they're a really great place to begin building your textures from as well, because they look amazing, but they are a nice, simple setup. It's looking at, just color, a bit of subsurface, and individual Maxon noises for bump and displacement. So we don't have to worry about, opening this up, this really crazy node tree, which is just daunting for everyone, really. So yeah, we took those, we created a scene. This scene here just, looks at a cloner setup with a random and a push apart. And then we looked at creating those vertex maps. So if there are not any questions, I've been having a little look through the chat. So a couple of questions that are slightly off topic. If you do have any questions that are, more to do with perhaps a slightly different topic, then let me just show you a little thing. Oh God, this is where I'm testing myself. It's been a while since I've been on here. Here we go. QR code. Is it the QR code? Yes. Feel free to scan this QR code and ask us any questions. If there's stuff that you want to see on live streams or stuff that you'd love to learn that isn't already on the training team, and bearing in mind there's loads of content on there, so check it out first before you ask your question, then feel free to ping that on there. If you have any questions for me that are slightly off topic, I saw one on here that was a bit to do with, you know, how to find work in 3D motion design, then DM me on Instagram. I'm at It Was Elly. It should be here, teeny tiny, but it's at It Was Elly. Anything else to do with that maybe isn't necessary to do with the stream, DM me and I will give you all of my time as much as I possibly can, helping answering those questions. But yeah, anything else, then feel free to use that QR code. I'm just having a little ping through the others. So thanks for nice messages as well. I'm glad you guys are enjoying it. Oh, also next month, I'm going to be doing 2 live streams. So normally I live stream once a month on top of some of the other stuff. But I'm going to do 2. I'm going to do a Redshift top tips, and I'm going to do a exploring particles stream. I'm not going to tell you the rest of the stuff because that's a secret. Let me just have a quick read for the rest. Okay, so this is a good suggestion from you, Lisa. I completely appreciate this. I understand trying to cover multiple time zones is challenging. At the end of the day, I'm in the UK, so this is kind of the end of my day. But I can appreciate a lot of sort of the US team will watch. I know it's like early in the morning for you. Some East Coast, it's lunchtime. If you're, Asia or Australia, it's, very end of their day. But this is a great suggestion. And if more people would love us to cover more time zones, then just let us know and we will do our best. I'm already thinking about maybe streaming twice a day, just to ensure I can get the morning and the afternoon. But yeah, absolutely. Always share this feedback. We absolutely love to hear it. And I promise we take on everything. We listen to everything that you say. And we want to make these live streams basically as good as we possibly can for you. That's kind of like the idea. Cool. So CJ was wondering, do you know how to get a vertex map from the alpha of a camera mapped PNG texture? Is it possible? Think of growing from the border of a logo on an alpha. Yes. So this should be, I'm not sure about the camera mapped option, but you should be able to basically, in the same way that we use the shader field, you can apply like an image. And so try that. It might need to be black and white or grayscale, and you should then be able to use an image, just maybe tweak it a little bit in Photoshop, throw that in there, and it should work in the same way. And then if you want to create the outline of an image, so this is one thing that we didn't talk about, is you can use the curve option, and you can remap the handles to then create the border outline of a vertex map. So if that's not what you need, then training@maxon.net or ping me a message. Let me know what you're looking to do kind of in a bit more detail, and I will try and figure it out for you. Okay, cool. Well, I'll wrap this up because we have just gone past the hour, but thank you to everyone who is still with me. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know any of your feedback, comments, all the stuff that you would love to learn. We've got plenty of time in 2025 together. So have a lovely rest of your day, whether it is your morning, afternoon, evening. Thank you for being here. And yes, I will catch you on a stream very soon. Bye, everyone.